way to do business. I also appreciate availing the opportunity and the ceremony. I think I also compliment my colleague, Ambassador Hashmi. He is doing a great job for this country, and the task he has demonstrated, the B2B business forums he had during our visits in China, and another one is going to be on 24th of this month.
Front seat पे आ जाए सब, settle down, settle down. Just waiting for the lights to return, and then we can start, or we can start, because he has to. Was it? Let's start.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone.
Please keep quiet and settle down.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I am Myra Vahid. I am a student at CPPG. It is my esteemed privilege to welcome you all to the second session of CPPG Summer Conference 2026 titled Afghanistan Relations from Conflict Management to Long-Term Stability. This section will focus on the lessons from 2026 border operations and ongoing talks addressing the TTP's sanctuaries, border management, trade and economic engagement, trust deficit, and the role of China and other actors in de-escalation. Now I will introduce our panelist. Our key role speaker for today is Ambassador Asif Durrani. Asif Durrani is seasoned diplomat and policy expert with extensive experience in regional affairs, particularly Afghanistan and the broader South Asian region. He is a former special representative for Afghanistan and has played a key role in shaping Pakistan's diplomatic engagement on Afghan peace and stability. Over the course of his career in Foreign Service of Pakistan, he has held several senior positions, including serving as Pakistan's ambassador to United Arab Emirates, and has been closely involved in strategic policy formulation, conflict management, and regional cooperation initiative. His work reflects deep expertise in security, diplomacy, and Pakistan's foreign policy dynamics. Next, we have Dr. Ryan Brasher. He is joining us online. He is a political scientist whose work focused on comparative politics, particularly in South Asia. He has earned his PhD from Indiana University, Bloomington, and he's currently associate professor in Simpson University, and he's also an affiliate at Foreman Christian College. His research explored themes like state formation, ethnic nationalism, and the role of religion in politics, especially in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Is also the author of the book Afghan Patchwork State, which examines the historical and ideological challenges of building a cohesive state in Afghanistan. His scholarship contributes to the broader debates on governance and political order in conflict afflicted regions, and he's also engaged in academic collaboration and publications that connect theoretical insights with real world policy and regional dynamics. Then we have Dr. Faiz Zalan, and he's a we have then Dr. Amir Raza. Dr. Amir Raza is the faculty member at the Department of Political Science, University of Peshawar. He has received his PhD from the University of Massachusetts. He heads the Afghanistan Research Cell at the University of Peshawar. His research interest includes the political of Afghanistan and Afghanistan relationship with the outside world. Then we have Ms. Rimshe Ahmed. She is a senior fellow at Displaced International.
درانه سي محترم سلام علیکم ورحمت الله وبرکاتو. کابل نه زحمت در کوم فیض لاندې. تاسو غږ بند ده.
دلن صاحب السلام علیکم خدای مو
سلام
راوله
علیکم ستړي مشه خدای مو ښه درولي ډیره
خیریت
مننه ډیر
دی.
خوشاله یم چې تاسو وینم
چېرته یې
هیله ده چې
د
ژوند ښه
لاهور کې که کابل کې
نه کابل کې یم
ښه شه د خیره شه
تیر ځل یې ماته ویزه نه وه ایشو کړې دا ځل یې ماته چې کله دوی هغه بلنه راکړه ما ویل مال ویزه خو نه ایشو کوي کم از کم آنلاین خو به د دراني صاحب او نورو ملګرو له معلوماتو نه سړی ګټه واخلي
نه ولې نه بلکې دا د موږ هم د ده پسې دغه لګیا یو چې دا ویزه ریسټرکشنز دي دا ختم شي
ان شاء الله ډیره مننه
لرو ان شاء الله او یو سم دغه لار به وځي
خدای دې وکړي چې حالات ښه شي.
نو څنګه د نن سبا څه مصروفیت مو دی؟
ولا زه خو یونیورسيټي ته ځم کابل یونیورسيټي کې پولیټیکل ساينس کې او دارنګه انټروډکشن ټو افغانستان سټډیز کې سټوډنټس لرم په پی ایچ ډي او ماسترز کې. او دلته کابل کې نو کابل خو تاسو معلومات کېږي سړی ډیر زیات فعالیت پکې نشي کولای نو هغه ریستریکشن او هغه بلیکنس هغه شته ولې مصروف یو خپل نه لکه علمي کار ته مخه کړې ده بس الحمدلله کتاب مطالعه تاسو اورو
بس نو زه دغه دی زه ډېر کم کوشش کوم چې کم وژغېږم مګر عجیبه ماحول جوړ شوی دی متاسفانه نو دا د برداشت له منځه لاړ دی د دواړو منځ
برداشت ډیر کمزوره ده نه ښه یاستئ تاسې خو زمینه تاسې ته مسایله ده الحمدلله تاسې نور ملګري فردوس صاحب ده حسن خان صاحب ده دارنګه طاهر خان ده ملګري شته فعالیت کوي موږ خواته متاسفانه هر څه په زیرو کې ضرب دی لکه کابل نه هیڅوک اکټیو نه دي او که څوک اکټیو کېږي نو ریستریکشن زیات دي نشي کولی چې څه ډیلیور کړي
او یو بل پرابلم دا دی چې هغوی تر اوسه ځان ته مجاهد ګڼي که یعنې د ګورننس موډ کې راغلي نه دي چې
نه دي
اوس په حکومت کې د حکومت چې طرز حکمراني بیلي یعنې طرز حکمراني په لړ کې زما خیال ډېر کار کول پکار
و بالکل داسې موږ خو شروع کې به بحثونه ورسره کول اورید اوس یې اوریم نه خبره دا ده چې تا ته یو ځل یو مسؤلیت در واوښته یا د خپله ځان ته مسؤلیت واخیسته نو باید د هغه د ادا کولو ظرفیت او وړتیا هم ځان کې پیدا کړي که ته اوس په پاکستان کې سفیر یې نو ته باید هلته په ډیپلوماسۍ کې هم فعال واوسېږي د ډیپلوماسۍ په اصولو باندې هم سره خلاصي د خپل هیواد او دارنګه د کوربه هیواد په حقوقي ارزښتونو باندې هم سره خلاصي له بده مرغه دوی مسؤلیتونه اخیستي دي ډېر غټ ولې د هغې د ترسره کولو نه اراده شته او نه ظرفیت
نو اوس دې کې موږ څه کولی شو یعنې په پاکستان افغانستان منځ د هغه بیا لار څنګه پاتې شو ما ته وویل چې دا تاسو دا ډېر ژر به زه چې کوم وخت ځانګړی استاذ ولم ویل چې تاسو ډېر ژر به دا انشاءالله ووینئ چې موږ د ټي ټي پي مخنیوی به وکړو ما څومره موده کې وایي دا 3-4 میاشتې 3-4 میاشتې بعد فعالیتونه لا زیات شو نو ما صاحب دا دغه ستاسو ولا داسې د مشکلات درلود دا اوس انشاءالله ته به ووینې چې دا راتلونکي 4 میاشتې کې به ډېر فرق وویني 4 میاشتې هم تېر شو هغه صورتحال لا بلکې دغه صورتحال خراب شو نو هغه ما چې دې کې مسله څه ده وایي چې دی موږ دا بیریږو چې دوی چیرې داعش خواته لاړ نشي او هسې تللی هم دي ما وروره دا که دا شی دي خو پکار چې موږ یو د بل سره زیات تړونه وکړو کومک وکړو چې که داعش پاکستان کې وجود لري خو موږ ته راووایي چې دا موږ د مخنیوی وکړو موږ خو د هغوی غندنه کوو تاسو د ټي ټي پي غندنه خو نه کوئ خو دغه یو دغه و دا تا سره خبره کوم بل ځای داسې غږېږم نه مګر دا چې ما چې ولیدله اوسه پورې دوی ځان ته مجاهد ګڼي او هغه زمانې لاړ وروره اوس نه وایي دي ستا په لاس کې حکومت کوشش وکړي چې د خلکو سره یو ستاسې حامیان شي حمایت ټولون چې دی هغه آسان کار نه دی مګر ګور
تاسو خبره په ګل بدله سفیر صاحب محترم ما سره کله کله پوښتنه دا پیدا شي چې د دې خلکو ظرفیت هغه پرایمري اسسمنټ یو بولي یا پریلیمینري اسسمنټ دا خو باید د پاکستان او د سیمې د هیوادونو سره وای خصوصا لوګو خلکو سره چې په دوحه کې ډیر فعال وو
زلان صاحب پاکستان کې کومه دغه عالمان ناست دي هغوی کېدای شي هغوی خو هم د دوی رنګ وکړه د هغوی سره خو هم توپ
نو اوس خو پر لکه داسې کومه خبره کوي دا ډېره غټه ریالټي ده لکه دا یو ډېر یعنې
زه خو دا په مخکې وایم ما وروره چې تاسو څه چې کرلې د هغه اوس وتې دی
خبره دغه ده اوس مسله دا ده چې که چېرته موږ د خپل پرسپیکټیو باندې کار ونه کړو او خپله یو نه لکه هغه تاسو تجربه زیاته ده الحمدلله دغه هغه ستراتیژیک فریم ورک د دې لپاره موږ ونه لرو چې موږ په شارټ ټرم کې میډ ټرم کې او لانګ ټرم کې کومې خواته روان یو ماته ښکاري موږ ورځ تر بلې خرابېږو خصوصا هغه خلک چې په دواړو خواو کې شریک ارزښتونه لري خپلویانې لري پیژنګلو لري ناسته ولاړه لري اوس دا پرون یعنې زه الله حاضر ده په 1996 نه تر 2000 پورې یو لس وارې به زه تللی یم نورنګ ته او بنو ته هلته د ما د خور کورنۍ وه نو دا پرون چې نورنګ کې برید شوی ده ما ته هغې نورنګ بازار او د هغوی یو رقم ته ښایسته الوا خوري هغه الوا هغه د نورنګ د خلکو مینه مروت خلک چې دي که خیال دی ډېر خواږه پښتو وایي ډېر خواږه خلک دي د هغوی هغه تکلیف مې سترګو ته درېږي چې په هغوی به څه تېرېږي ځکه دا تکلیف موږ لیدلی ده په کابل کې په بنو کې ته وګوره بنو څومره خواږه خلک دي څومره پښتانه خلک دي خلک هره ورځ خلک مړه کېږي هره ورځ خلک پکې وژل کېږي او د خدای لپاره د استشهادي په نامه باندې د موټر بم په نامه دا خو موږ د امریکایانو په خلاف استعمالول دا خو به موږ د ډېرو خطرناکو جنګونو په برخه کې دا خو موږ د خپلو ولس د خپلو خلکو د خپل جومات د خپلې مدرسې د خپل بازار په خلاف نه استعمالول نو دا وضعیت ډېر خطرناک خواته روان ده
دغه دی او یو شی دا تاسو دغه ما مشوره کول مال که د هلته په افغانستان کې هر څه شي که د سیاسي توګه باندې چې څه بدلون راځي هغه د افغانان به راولي وروره که د بهرنۍ څه ګوتې ووهل خو هغه بیا دغه حال چې اوس موږ نو هغه خدای چې دا څنګه دی او اوس هغه لار ماته نه ښکاري چې آیا چې افغانان خپله سره کښېني یووالی وکړي او بیا یو لایعمل جوړ کړي چې هلته به یې څه کول نو هغه شی زه نه وینم څوک د باندې جلسې کوي اوس زه دغه ته تللی وم استانبول ته خلک مو ولیدلو نو بېل هغه د خپل سندرې وایي یو په یو رنګ چې یو اواز نه دی
صحیح خبر
نو هغه بیا دا چې دوی به ستاسو په سر به ناست دي یعنې د ښځو تعلیم به نه وي ما دا طالبان څه پوښتنه وکړه ما ګوره دا 20 کال بعد که ستاسو دا ښځې ډاکټر نه وي تاسو خپل ښځو چاته به ښکاره کوئ دا خو به دغه دی نارینه ډاکټر نو وایي چې څه وکړو دا مشر ته راس مجبور شیخ صاحب دا څرنګه ده دا څوک ذهنیت څه دي څه کول غواړي
تاسو خبره بیخي په ځای ده چې باید افغانان خپله افغان افغان لټ پروسس ته مخه کړي تر څو د دې ستونزې حل راووځي ولې د تاسو تجربه زیاته ده په افغانستان کې له بده مرغه په تېرو 15 لسیزو کې یا په تېرو 17 لسیزو کې کوم بدلونه چې راغلي دي یا بدلونه داخل نه دي راغلي بهر نه راغلي یو دویم دا ده چې په داخل کې د افغانانو لومړیتوبونه ډېر مختلف دي یعنې دا اوس زه د یو افغان په توګه تاسو سره غږیږم او په بازار کې دا لومړیتوب نشته چې د پاکستان سره موږ جګړه ده یا په بنو کې ولې خلک وژل کېږي یا په تورخم کې ولې دروازې بندې دي یا ولې دا کډوال دلته لومړیتوب یعنې د نجونو مکتب نه ده دا په 2021 کې لومړیتوب 2022 کې دا لومړیتوب بدل شي 2022 کې لومړیتوب په دې باندې څنګه ووځم له افغانستانه څنګه یورپ ته ځان ورسوم څنګه امریکې ته دویم لومړیتوب دا چې څنګه ځان ته وظیفه پیدا کړم ځکه 50% خلک په ان جی اوز کې مصروف وو، 50% خلک د پیارټانو کې مصروف وو، یعنی 100% افغانان چې په 2000 تر 2021 پورې په سرویسز کې مصروف وو. په تیرو 15 کلو کې سرویسز سېکټر چې دا زیرو شو. دا سرینا هوټل لري مثال په ډول لاړ یو سرویسز سنټر وو. نو اوس یې سرویسز نشته، نو داسې فکر وکړه چې 100% خلک بیکاره دي. نو خلک په روزګار پسې، په بیکارۍ پسې، په مایګریشن، اکنامک مایګریشن پسې، په لانګ ټرم یې نه لکه 10 کاله بعد به زه چیرته ژوند کوم، په دې سوچ کې دي. دا سوچ چې په دوی باندې والي څوک ده، وزیر څوک ده، رئیس جمهور څوک ده، په تلویزیون کې څوک غږیږي، کانفرنس ته څوک لاړه، پاکستان سره څه کیږي، ازبکستان، دا لومړیتوبونه په داخل کې دا اوس ورک دي. ما ته ښکاري عین وضعیت د مجاهدینو وخت کې و، عین وضعیت د کمونستانو وخت کې و، عین وضعیت د داود خان وخت کې و چې کورني لومړیتوبونه د افغانانو له لاسه تللي وو، او بهرنی کوم لومړیتوب چې بهر نه کتل کېده چې باید په افغانستان کې سیاسي کمیونټي رامنځته شي، سیاسي تحولات رامنځته شي، د افغانستان اونرشپ باید د افغانانو لاس ته ولویږي، افغانان باید they should lead themselves. دا لومړیتوبونه موږ په دې 16 لسیزو کنفلیکټونو کې له لاسه ورکړي. نو اوس هم له بده مرغه موږ ته یو بهرنی فورس، یو بهرنی کمیونټي، یو بهرنی یونټي چې هغه وکولی شي افغانان انکلوسیفلی ځان سره واخلي. یو دې ته اړتیا ده. دویمه دا ده چې د بهر نه داخلي روڼتیا ته اړتیا ده. لکه اوس تاسې د مثال په ډول د استانبول د پروسس خبره وکړه، یا په اورمچي کې کوم شی واقع سي، یا دا د دوحې پروسس او د یو ان لیډ د ګوتریش د افیس نه په دې پروسو کې یو څه سنجیدګي پکار ده. په سیمه کې او په یورپ کې، په سیمه کې او په نړۍ کې دغه کنفلیکټینګ میسیجز سری دا انټرنلی موږ افیکټ کوي. لکه دغه کنفلیکټ سره دا موږ ته دا راکوي چې خصوصا طالبانو ته چې پاکستان پرې د ایران سره زلا راوړم، سبا ته چې ایران مخالف شي دا پرې د ازبکستان سره لا راوړم. نو اوس دلته یونټي نشته. دا چې دا پرابلم ریجنلی یونیفاید پرابلم ده. د افغانستان انسټیبیلیټي ازبکستان، ایران، تاجکستان، رشیا، چاینا ټول افیکټ کوي. مګر همدلته موږ د پاکستان ډیسټیبلایزیشن د ایران په ګټه بولو، د ایران ډیسټیبلایزیشن د ازبکستان په ګټه بولو، د ازبکستان ډیسټیبلایزیشن د چاینا په ګټه. نو دا یونیفیکیشن اف میسیجز انساید افغانستان اند آوټساید افغانستان د دې نشتون افغانان یو رقم ته سردرګمه کړي دي متاسفانه.
نو بس تاسو دا چې کومه تجزیه ده دې کې حل هم شته دي. نو او دا بیخي سم، زه بالکل موافق او دې کې حل هم شته دي، او په کله چې دا دې کې دا نور مخته بوزو دا ډایلاګ شي دي دې کول پکار. مګر لوی دغه برخه به د افغانانو په لاس دوی څه کوي. ګوره باراني اسم سنس کولای چې تر څو په افغانستان دننه شي نفاق نه که دلته نفاق کې بیا دوی هم تیاری، بیا باراني خلک هم دا ګوري چې دې کې زما نو هغه لوی خبره ده چې دا یووالی افغان رنکس دننه شي اوسي په نو هغه بیا ډېر فرق کوي او ډېر زیات. او دا هم درته وایم چې د افغانستان سره چې کومه جغرافیکل اډوانټیج دي دوی غواړي، خو زما خیال دا بل سویټزرلینډ جوړېدای شي او دوی دپاره د هر خوا سره چې سنټرل ایشیا واخله، د ساوت ایشیا واخله، دغه ویسټ ایشیا دی، ایران پر لار دا نور، خو بیخي زیات. او بیا افغانان چې دي ښه انډسټریز خلک دي، انټرپرنرشپ لري، خواري کاږي، یعنی موبایل خلک دي، یعنی خالي خپل دغه خول کې نه دی بد، دوی موبیلیټي لري.
His fear was that they would join the ranks of the ISKP, which coming from him, that this would become a problem both for Afghanistan as well as for Pakistan, because ISKP is more of an anti-system force, and which, like I said, is a challenge for both of these countries. So that was one kind of justification that they had for why they were not clamping down on the TTP. But he said that many of the TTP families and fighters, they had been relocated away from Pakistan borders to make it difficult for them. So this was one version of what the Afghan Taliban was saying. The other thing that we generally saw was that the rank and file in the among the Taliban, the rank and file, they were more openly supportive of the TTP because they believe, number one, now you have to remember two things here. One, the I think so. In the earlier discussion, we were speaking about how India has been Pakistan's most pivotal enemy or Pakistan's main nemesis when it comes to international relations. But I've never seen a country with as much deep-rooted hatred for Pakistan as it is in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So even for Taliban, even for people who we believe are very, very authoritarian and they can do what they want to do, they cannot go against the domestic opinion when it comes to Pakistan. This is something that would run through this discussion, whether you talk about the red line, whether you talk about the refugee issue, anything. The Taliban are quite wary of what these people think. When they believe that the more anti-Pakistan they come across, the more legitimate they would be seen by the common Afghan, the more they would be supported by the common Afghan, as they, like I said, because also the problem was that when Afghan Taliban were coming into power, many people believed that they were a Pakistani proxy, and therefore now I think more so than Hamid Karzai, Ashraf Ghani, Taliban need to distance themselves from Pakistan for domestic approval. So that is something that you have to keep in mind. And the same feeling is within the lower ranks of the Afghan Taliban. So I said one thing is that there is very deep-rooted hatred, and therefore whoever is fighting against Pakistan is fighting for a just cause, and therefore you should support them. So that is one idea. The other one is that although the Taliban have at least diplomatically, publicly shown no intention of exporting the so-called Islamist revolution outside of Afghanistan, the rhetoric that brought them here, the rhetoric from, for example, people like Abdullah Izam or Ayman al-Zawahiri and all of that, the rhetoric has always been one of a globalist jihad. So they are heirs to that globalist jihad, just in rhetoric, like I said. So the top leadership usually is more careful in whether or not they threaten other countries, but the feeling in the lower ranks, it continues that the revolution cannot only stop in Afghanistan, it has to be exported elsewhere. So this is where, like I said, much of the support for the TTP comes from. So that is, like I said, that is the bulk of what I wanted to say. On TTP, like I said, we can continue to talk about any of the issues related to that. The other thing that I wanted to speak about, like I said, was the refugee issue. Now, I'm sure you will know why I get these statistics on the presentation whenever I get back. You can read it from there.
Taliban, the Afghan previous government also, but I think more so the Afghan Taliban. The Afghan Taliban are not receiving as much international aid as the previous governments were receiving. So the Afghan governments were very aid dependent, although people keep saying that the Afghan Taliban still received about, I think they do 38 million per week. I don't know what is the situation of that right now. They continue to at least about a year ago. I don't know about it right now. But still the aid that they're receiving is not nearly as much. The country was basically bankrolled by the United States of America and its Western allies for about 20 years. So as soon as the Americans went back, the money dried, that money or the level of that, it came down. So the Afghan Taliban did not have the capacity to, to accommodate, or they did not have the capacity of the governance in general. But especially if you send back such an influx of refugees, it would create a much bigger challenge for them. So on the face of it, again, Pakistan's policy was that we are sending these refugees back, that because now the country is not at war anymore and it does not make sense for the Afghan refugees to still continue to live in other countries because the Taliban have now stabilized the country and therefore they should go back. But the reality of it is that the Afghan refugees were used by Pakistan primarily as a leverage to pressurize the Afghan Taliban. And the idea was that since they would not be able to deal with this influx, and therefore they would give Pakistan policy concessions, or they would in other words they would submit to what Pakistan wanted to get out of Taliban. Now, I'm not saying that both things are mutually exclusive, but again, like I said, this was at least at the policy level what Pakistan was doing. Now, Pakistan already securitized and, like I said, leveraged the safety and security of these people, and they were sent back. And many of these, you have to remember, we we might see them as a larger group in terms of all of them being Afghans, but you have to realize that many of these were marginalized communities. So probably half of them would be already women or young.
Ambassador Durrani, Professor Zaland, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Dr.
Yes,
Saif.
I
How are
can
you?
hear.
Dr. Saif, salam alaikum. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam. So nice to hear you speaking. I'm told that they are resolving their issues right now.
Right.
Yeah.
They should be online shortly.
Good.
Yeah, I can see that even my people here in Islamabad, the CNN and others, they are being interrupted. I don't know whether it is, at a larger level or it is there at the FC college.
I think at FC today they seem to have some generator issues that they usually do not. But I think they are resolving it right now.
Okay.
So inshallah they will get it done quickly.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. We are used to it. Don't worry.
Good. I look forward to hearing you speak.
Well, I'll be repeating myself. For me, it would be repetition. I don't know, but we'll be speaking to you first time. So I look forward to that.
Good. Ambassador, you served in Iran, that is correct?
Yes. I served twice, once as counselor and then second time as ambassador. And before that, I was ambassador in UAE. So I also served in London as Deputy High Commissioner. I was Deputy Head of Mission in Kabul. And I was Counselor Disarmament dealing with First Committee in Pakistan Mission to the UN in New York. I went there just 3 months before 9/11.
Wow.
Then I also served India. That was my first posting. I was second secretary.
You were in Iran during which years?
First time in 98 till 2001. From there, I went to New York. And second time as ambassador from 2016 to 18. Yeah. 2 years.
So it was while the nuclear deal was still valid during that time.
1 year earlier, nuclear deal was signed in 2015. And in 2016, it was still there. But President Trump won the election in 2017. He scrapped it.
Yeah, that is what we are dealing with now, I suppose.
Yeah, correct.
And currently, you are located. Are you back home in?
I shuttle between Quetta and Islamabad, but yes. Now, most of the time I'm in Islamabad because of my think tank activities.
At IPRI?
Media. I am a senior research fellow at IPRI. And in between, I went as the special rep for Afghanistan for a year and a half. Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, I taught at FC College for 7 years.
You have, okay.
Many of I'm currently I've been in the US for 5 years now, in California, but many of my students at FC, they came from Quetta.
Did they? Okay.
Yes. They invited me many times. I haven't been able to go yet, but I hope to go soon. But yes, in political science in particular, we had many Pashtun students, and most of those were from Balochistan.
Okay, I'm from Balochistan. I'm a Pashtun myself.
Yes, I enjoyed hearing you and Professor Zaland interact with each other.
Well, sorry, since we were speaking, I didn't know that it is going viral. So now, currently, you are based in US, in the US.
So they are trying to work the American press into pressuring Trump through this economic.
At a small college in California, Simpson University.
All right. Okay. Oh, boy. Okay.
That's a
So when did you leave FC College?
In 2021.
Oh, okay, right.
So it has been a while, but I tend to travel back during the summers.
All right.
To reconnect with the university.
You are from the US?
I am Khana Bedosh.
Khana Bedosh, okay.
I grew up and I was born in Germany.
Right.
My parents were missionaries there. They are from the US, but I grew up in Germany for 20 years, and then lived a bit in the US, a little bit in Scandinavia, and then spent a year in Afghanistan actually in 2004.
I went there 2005, 5 till 9. I was
5 till 9. Okay.
Hardly 9.
So
3.5 years. Yeah.
So maybe we crossed paths, but I was working for a small NGO at the time in Mazar-e Sharif.
All right. I was based in Kabul, and from Afghanistan I went to London as Deputy High Commissioner.
Okay. So you were in Kabul during the Hamid Karzai era.
Correct, Hamid Karzai. And Ashraf Ghani was flexing his wings then. He was quite, serious about putting up his candidature.
Yes, I'm sorry we are missing Professor Amar Raza's presentation. Have you met him before?
No, I haven't. Maybe, unless I see his channel.
He's a professor of political science at the University of Peshawar.
Okay, Professor Amir?
Amar Raza, yeah.
All right, okay.
He is, him and his colleagues have done quite a bit of work on the repatriation program.
All right, okay, right. Now, personally, I don't subscribe to this repatriation because that was, if the purpose was to pressurize the Taliban, they didn't come under pressure. For them, it means very little if those going back, they die or they live. And they don't shoulder any responsibility of rehabilitating those repatriated people. So I'm personally I'm opposed to this policy.
Yeah, I was reading that you had some disagreement with the government on this issue.
I mean, yeah, I have said it publicly. It's just not the government. I've said it this in public. And similarly, I firmly believe that TTP, if you want to neutralize them, you have to neutralize them in the former FATA region. First, you neutralize them here, and those who are taking shelter in Afghanistan would become, they would become irrelevant. So,
I think we're back.
Yeah.
Escalation of regional tensions, saying that the region currently is extremely volatile, especially with the ongoing conflict between Iran and the United States of America. So currently what we are going through is an extremely volatile region in not just South Asia, but all of Eurasia. So if another war erupts, it could impact all of the Eurasian region, which basically talks about, Europe and Asia. So there are 4 points to consider: that Pakistan wants to emerge as a harbinger of peace, as we've seen recently, but at the same time is forcefully sending Afghan refugees back home. Then we have that when it does not recognize the Taliban regime as legitimate, how can it negotiate with a rogue actor? China's growing influence in Afghanistan is another point to consider, because the relationship between Pakistan and China has soured with how CPEC was basically treated. And the fourth thing is that the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan currently is one of the worst humanitarian crises right across our border. There's an active gender apartheid going on, but there is where does Pakistan's morality lie? I would like to now invite Ambassador Asif Durrani. I hope you can hear us, to shed more light on the current situation between Pakistan-Afghanistan relation, border clashes, and what to expect next, because we're seeing this crisis getting broader day by day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Major General Noel Coker, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful to the Center for Public Policy and Governance for inviting me to this conference on the very important theme of navigating future trends and transformative pathways for Pakistan. The topic I have been asked to speak on is Pakistan-Afghanistan relations, from conflict management to long-term stability. It's a vast topic, but I'll try to navigate through the ongoing gamut between Pakistan and Afghanistan, although the path is strewn with landmines, lethal enough to poison the relationship between the two brotherly countries. Pakistan and Afghanistan share a relationship shaped by geography, history, culture, religion, and deep people-to-people connections. No matter how difficult political relations may become at any given moment, the reality remains that peace and stability in one country are inseparable from those in the other. Therefore, the challenge before us is not merely conflict management, but the transformation of this fragile relationship into one based on long-term regional stability and mutual economic interdependence. At present, Pakistan-Afghanistan relations are passing through a difficult phase. The major source of tension is the growing threat posed by the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP, which continues to use Afghan soil for planning and launching attacks against Pakistan. This issue has created mistrust, security concerns, and diplomatic friction between the two neighbors. However, I would argue that the current tensions are temporary in nature and should not be viewed as irreversible. History tells us that Pakistan and Afghanistan have repeatedly gone through cycles of tensions and rapprochement in the 1950s and 60s. The present situation can also improve, provided there is sustained engagement, strategic patience, and above all, persistent pressure on terrorist networks operating across the border. Ladies and gentlemen, the key issue is how to address the TTP challenge effectively. Military measures alone will not produce sustainable results. Any long-term counterterrorism strategy must enjoy the support of local population in border regions. And the former federally administered tribal areas, FATA. Without the cooperation of local communities, local elders, religious leaders, and border populations, it is difficult to isolate extremist elements. Once you neutralize the TTP cadres in the merged districts, those taking shelter in Afghanistan would become redundant and irrelevant. The people residing on both sides of the border have suffered enormously due to decades of war, displacement, terrorism, and economic deprivation. They want peace, connectivity, trade, and opportunities for their youth. Therefore, Pakistan and Afghanistan must avoid policies that alienate ordinary people. Winning public confidence is essential for denying space to extremist organizations. At the same time, Pakistan must carefully distinguish between legitimate security concerns and broader state-to-state relations. One area where caution is required is trade and economic connectivity. Pakistan should not weaponize trade, economic transit, or people-to-people interaction. Such an approach would ultimately hurt Pakistan's own long-term strategic and economic interests. We all know that Afghanistan is Pakistan's natural gateway to Central Asia. Geographically, Afghanistan provides the shortest and most viable route connecting Pakistan to the energy-rich and resource-rich Central Asian region. Projects related to regional connectivity, trade corridors, energy pipelines, and transit trade cannot succeed without a stable Afghanistan. If Pakistan uses trade restrictions as a coercive instrument, it may create temporary pressure, but in the long run, it could undermine regional integration efforts and push Afghanistan toward alternative trade routes that bypass Pakistan altogether. Economic engagement should therefore be used as a stabilizing tool, not as a punitive instrument. For instance, Pakistan's trade with Central Asia totaled 55 million in 2020. After the Taliban regime's arrival in August 2021, trade with the region began to grow, reaching $460 million in 2024 and continuing to grow. However, the recent tensions between the two countries have adversely impacted trade with Central Asia. Therefore, instead of restricting connectivity, Pakistan should expand legal trade channels, improve border management, facilitate transit mechanisms, and encourage regional economic frameworks involving Afghanistan and Central Asia. Economic interdependence can gradually create consequences of peace on both sides. Ladies and gentlemen, excuse me. Another worrying dimension in the increasing role of external actors is exploiting Pakistan's Afghan tensions. India in particular appears to be taking advantage of the current environment by supporting anti-Pakistan militant groups such as TTP and Balotistan Liberation Army, or BLA. This development risks turning Afghanistan once again into a theater of regional rivalry between Pakistan and India. We have already witnessed such dynamics during the post-9/11 period, when Afghanistan became a battleground for competing regional interests. Unfortunately, there are signs that history may be repeating itself. A destabilized Afghanistan provides space for intelligence competition, proxy networks, and non-state actors. This is dangerous not only for Pakistan, but also for Afghanistan itself. The Afghan and interim authorities must recognize that allowing militant groups to operate freely will eventually undermine Afghanistan's own internal stability and international legitimacy. Pakistan and Afghanistan should therefore cooperate to ensure that their territories are not used against each other by hostile actors. Mutual security assurances, intelligence sharing, border coordination, and sustained political dialogue are essential to rebuilding trust. Another factor that could further complicate the regional environment is the ongoing confrontation between the United States and Iran. Any prolonged US-Iran war or escalation in the region could create wider instability across South and Southwest Asia. Such instability often creates operational space for non-state actors, extremist groups, and transnational militant networks. In periods of regional uncertainty, militant organizations exploit weak governance, porous borders, refugee flows, and economic distress. Pakistan could therefore face simultaneous security challenges from multiple fronts. In such a volatile environment, India may attempt to play a spoiler's role by intensifying pressure through covert means and by encouraging anti-Pakistan elements operating in Afghanistan and elsewhere. This possibility cannot be ignored in any serious strategic assessment. Therefore, Pakistan must adopt a balanced, forward-looking policy toward Afghanistan, one that combines firmness on security issues with openness to economic cooperation and political engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, the future of Pakistan-Afghanistan relations should not remain hostage to short-term tensions. Both countries need to move from reactive crisis management toward a broader vision of regional stability. This requires sustained diplomacy, patience, and recognition of shared interests. There are several important steps that can help move relations in a positive direction. First, both countries must institutionalize regular political and security dialogue at multiple levels. Second, they must strengthen border management mechanisms while ensuring the smooth flow of legitimate people and trade. Third, both sides should invest in economic connectivity projects that create mutual stakes in peace and stability. Fourth, regional powers should support cooperation rather than geopolitical competition in Afghanistan. Moscow format is the best forum to promote stability in Afghanistan and its relations in the region. The trilateral mechanism between Pakistan, Afghanistan, and China is yet another formidable forum to address thorny issues by the parties. And finally, extremist groups and non-state actors must not be allowed to dictate the future of the region. The Taliban regime will have to come out of the militant mode and display responsible governance, especially in its relations with the neighbors. In conclusion, Pakistan and Afghanistan are bound together by geography and destiny. Neither country can achieve lasting peace in isolation from the other. The current tensions, though serious, are manageable and temporary if addressed with wisdom, strategic patience, and regional cooperation. The path forward lies not in confrontation, isolation, or proxy competition, but in connectivity, economic integration, and a shared commitment to combating terrorism in all its forms. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Durrani, for speaking so eloquently about the Pakistan-Afghanistan relations. Cooperation, not competition. But it's really important to understand and find pathways in terms of when two countries do not share the same set of values, when they do not see cohabiting in a region where they both want to dominate, where they both want to form alliances which will benefit them as compared to looking at regional stability and looking at the bigger picture. I would now like to invite Dr. Ryan Brasher to shed more light on if there is any possibility of the two countries, one where military is really strong, Pakistan, the other where the Taliban regime is residing, which is an illegitimate regime which we do not recognize globally. Can they both sit together and look at the region and find pathways where they can coexist and not compete for regional powers? Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So nice to see so many familiar faces. Thank you, Dr. Noel Coker, for the invitation. Thank you, the Center for Public Policy and Governance, for the invitation. It is always a pleasure. Today, I'm going to briefly talk about the Afghan-Pakistan dynamic from an American perspective. And I'm so happy that Dr. Zaland is joining us from Kabul University, and he can give you the internal perspective from Afghanistan. Please excuse me, it's just after 3 in the morning here in California. So if I am not making too much sense, hopefully that is not the normal situation. It is the time of day. But it's such a pleasure to be here. Now, when we start talking about the Afghan, so really, I'm going to briefly talk about three things. One is the change dynamic of the relationship between the government of Afghanistan, the Taliban, and Pakistan. Then I'm briefly going to talk about the American-Afghan relationship and how that relates to Pakistan. And then lastly, I'm going to end with a brief discussion of the current Assistant Secretary of State for South Asian and Central Asian Affairs, Paul Kapoor, which may shed light on American direction in terms of where they see the relationship with Pakistan and Afghanistan. So just as a reminder, I think it's very important to go back and look at the Pakistani relationship with the Afghan Taliban before September 2021. I'll just go through some quotes here. There's a quote here that Dexter Filkins, the decorated American journalist, now with the New Yorker, had an interview with an unnamed security official from Pakistan. And he quotes him saying the following: "We protect the Taliban. They are dependent on us. We are not going to allow them to make a deal with Karzai and the Indians." Then there's a infamous quote, or famous quote, I should say, by Hamid Gul on the Dunya News talk show that I came across. This is from 2014, and I thought this was quite educational. And he said the following: "Jab tarikh rakam hogi, तो कहेंगे कि ISI ने अमेरिका के मदद से सोवियत यूनियन को अफगानिस्तान में शिकस्त दे दी। फिर एक और जुमला होगा, ISI ने अमेरिका के मदद से अमेरिका को शिकस्त दे दी." So you have this prophetic triumphalism, so to speak. Then Imran Khan, and as the Taliban were taking over Kabul, he said the following: "What is happening in Afghanistan now? They have broken the shackles of slavery." You have the Pakistani journalist Zaid Hussain in Al Jazeera saying the following: "There may be a pretense, but no person can believe that Pakistan's security establishment does not have a favorite. The Taliban is the favorite, and they are there. They are not overtly happy, but they are actually feeling very satisfied." And then lastly, you have the former head of the ISI, Faiz Hamid, saying, very briefly, "Don't worry, everything will be okay," in a short little interview on television. And so why do I mention these things? I think it's just good to sit back and realize the massive change that has happened in the last 5 years. A case perhaps of buyer's remorse is too strong of a term, but certainly a massive change in the relationship between the Taliban and Pakistan. We can say that a friendly Afghanistan, which is what Pakistan has been craving for quite a long time, you have the concept of strategic depth, of course, does not appear to be anywhere in sight. I'm sure this has been discussed by Dr. Ahmed Raza and others, but since the TTP ended its ceasefire with Pakistan in 2022, there's been over 9,000 terrorism-related deaths inside Pakistan, based on a report by the Council of Foreign Relations. Afghanistan has resumed official relationship, well, I shouldn't say official, semi-official relationship with India. India updated its mission there to embassy status in 2025. You have a independent Taliban foreign policy, which is rather different from the one from the 1990s, which perhaps resembled the relationship between Afghanistan and the Raj in India between 1880 and 1919. A bit more. You have the Afghan repatriation program, which has come up a number of times as a kind of irritant in the relationship. And of course, you have this TTP activity, which has resulted in a number of cross-border skirmishes and including Pakistani airstrikes inside Afghanistan. So the big question, which I'm not going to answer, I'm just going to pose, is the relationship, and I'm posing this sort of perhaps with a scholarly rather than a policy driven perspective. Is the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan ultimately structurally driven, no matter the ideological motivation of the specific governments? And again, I don't have necessarily an answer for this, but the Afghan foreign policy is in some ways looking not too different, say, from the Karzai and the Ghani policy, at least as regards to Pakistan, and the Pakistani policy towards Afghanistan. Moving on to Afghan-American relations in the Trump era, and what that might, what kind of implications that might have for Pakistan. So, the Trump administration, for better or worse, has basically result in a total disengagement. If you go to the Department of State website, Afghanistan barely gets a mention. They've terminated all aid to Afghanistan. They suspended visas for Afghans wanting to come to the United States. They're starting to think about relocating Afghans that are living in the United States. And I live quite close to Sacramento, where a very large Afghan population is situated. And of course, they're watching these things quite worried. But at the same time, you also have a kind of a pragmatic germs of pragmatic engagements. Recently in Tolo News, there was an interview with Zalmay Khalilzad, and he expressed, and him coming, he's not in an official government capacity, but has certainly Republican tendencies in the American establishment. And he basically expressed American satisfaction with the Taliban cooperation as regards to the fight against Daesh. And recently, even the Afghan Taliban acknowledged, and again in Tolo News, the long-term impact of U.S. development projects in Afghanistan over the years, going back to the 1950s. With the work on a dam in Helmand and these kinds of things. Of course, there's issues with Americans still being detained in Afghanistan. Some have been returned, and that's a point of tension, but also of contact and negotiation. Trump being Trump, he tends to say very interesting things, and recently he made this Bagram Air Base gambit. And so the question arises, is this sort of a typical is this an aggressive posture, or is this simply sort of the typical President Trump's way of wanting to commence negotiations with the Taliban government in regard to other issues? And then lastly, the Taliban-Iran-US dynamic is interesting. The Taliban and the Iranian government have had a relationship of, I guess we could say, necessity for a while, that began back while the Taliban was still an insurgent group. And it's interesting to note that while the Afghan government condemned the American operation in Iran, they did so in a rather muted way. So leaving open the prospect of course, the Afghan Taliban would like to get official recognition from a variety of countries, including the United States. And the Taliban has had to negotiate sort of a balancing relationship between the Gulf countries, which are friendly with the United States, and from which it has received support in the past, and Iran. And so, despite, from my perspective, the unwise American military intervention in Iran, the relationship with the Taliban is certainly still available. So, in view of the of Afghanistan, what does the U.S.-Pakistan relationship look like? So, in many ways, I think recent events have shown that perhaps rapprochement and alignment are available after years of frustration. The phrase "distance makes the heart grow fonder" comes to mind. Especially in Pakistan, one gets the sense that reliance on two great rival powers, and perhaps even playing them off against each other is better than simply relying on the all-weather friend China. And so we've seen a charm offensive by Pakistan. I found the Nobel Prize nomination for President Trump very interesting. The U.S. played a role, of course, in mediating the India-Pakistan conflict in 2025. The U.S. was quite happy about Pakistan's crackdown and arrests of people related to Daesh. And of course, in many ways, the new hardline attitude of the Pakistani government towards the Taliban in Afghanistan opens up avenues of cooperation. And then most recently, of course, Pakistan's mediation in the U.S.-Iran conflict. So having said these things, there is potential for U.S. mediation in the Afghan-Pakistan conflict, but perhaps, and Ambassador Durrani mentioned that the other avenues via Russia and particularly China are probably a bit more likely, as the U.S. is currently rather distracted with its own military adventure. I did want to bring up, lastly, the appointment of Dr. Paul Kapoor as Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asian Affairs, replacing the famous or infamous in Pakistan, Donald Lu. And what I find interesting about Dr. Kapoor is that he's an academic, particularly a specialist on India-Pakistan nuclear dynamic. And academics, unlike diplomats, academics definitely have a paper trail. They've written, Dr. Kapoor has published quite a bit. And there's three key publications that were published in International Security, perhaps the most important international relations journal that is not quantitative, that provides perhaps some insight into his thinking. I don't know in how far he actually has independent power to determine U.S. policy towards Pakistan, but his appointment certainly gives us some direction. So in 2005, he spoke of the stability-instability paradox, this idea that nuclear stability can result in more conventional skirmishes between two countries, where he actually makes the opposite argument and says that the nuclear relationship between India and Pakistan, and particularly the credibility of Pakistan's threat to use nuclear weapons, has increased the likelihood of Pakistani military aggression, using examples like the 1999 Kargil operation. And that was due to initial Indian reluctance to engage in full-fledged conventional conflict. That's changed a little bit. But then efforts to establish more strategic stability would then create also more conventional stability. So he's arguing against the stability-instability paradox. But you can see his perspective coming through a little bit already. In 2009, he published a piece looking back at 10 years of nuclear relations between India and Pakistan. And he basically makes the same argument that the introduction of having India and Pakistan as nuclear powers has essentially led to a more aggressive Pakistan, which then in turn led to a more aggressive Indian military posture. And he didn't see this necessarily as both countries being suicidal, but rather that nuclear weapons had led to encouraged more risky behavior. And then in 2012, he co-authored a piece with Professor Ganguly called The Jihad Paradox, which became the basis for his later book, and where he basically argues that Pakistan's use of Islamic jihadists is not a byproduct or a sideshow, but rather a central component of Pakistan's security policy, particularly in its asymmetric relationship with India. And so that's benefited Pakistan in terms of helping it redress the imbalance with India, and enabling it to challenge India and Kashmir, and enabling it to exert control over Afghanistan without direct military involvement. But it's also had its drawbacks, particularly with jihadi groups becoming perhaps too powerful to control. So why am I talking about the India-Pakistan relationship? I'm basically just talking about in the context of Paul Kapoor. Paul Kapoor and subsequent has basically prioritized close relations, American relations with India to counter China, and sees that as the way forward, despite current acrimony with India over trade. He's expressed skepticism of close counterterrorism partnership with Pakistan that had been attempted for 20 years, and believed this would damage U.S.-India relations. To him, U.S.-India relations are a priority. So he says, sometimes, moreover, U.S. and Pakistani interests may converge, justifying limited cooperation in specific cases. But American leaders must abandon their decades-long dream of achieving strategic convergence between the U.S. and Pakistan. And so, in many ways, although it is surprising sometimes to see that academics joining the Trump administration, he has shown an alignment with Trump's unabashed interest-based foreign policy. So it is not someone who is ideologically hostile to Pakistan, but skeptical of the relationship from a geopolitical perspective. And it was interesting to note, in November, he met with Pakistan's ambassador to the U.S., and in subsequent social media tweets, you see Ambassador Sheikh speaking of a desire to build an economically entrenched strategic partnership. When you look at Kapoor's official statement in social media, he does not use the term strategic partnership. He simply speaks of advancing the relationship to make both countries more prosperous and secure. So I will stop here, but basically what I'm saying is that America has not prioritized Afghanistan. It's a sideshow, which reminds me a bit of the early 1990s. The relationship with Pakistan, despite current glimpses of promise, is perhaps also not something that appears to be a priority, at least if we take the appointment of Paul Kapoor as a sign. But without further ado, I'll pass on the baton to Dr. Zaran to give us the Afghan perspective.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you so much. Thanks to CPPG for the invitation, specifically and especially to Dr. Noor Kakal and also to Dr. Ryan Brasher for providing me this chance, not only to speak and talk from the perspective of an Afghan on the issue of Pakistan-Afghanistan relationship, conflict management, to long-term stability from an Afghan perspective, but also to learn from everybody who is participating in this very important discussion. Distinguished professors, respected colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan is shaped by history, geography, cultural, and shared challenges. While tensions and misunderstandings have too often defined our interactions, conflict cannot be resolved through hostility alone. Our two nations must recognize that peace and stability are in the interest of both peoples. As an Afghan, we believe that effective conflict management requires dialogue, mutual respect, cooperation. Border security, terrorism, refugee concerns, and economic development are issues that demand joint solutions rather than blame. Afghanistan seeks a relationship with Pakistan based on sovereignty, non-interference, and regional partnership. We must strengthen diplomatic communication, expand trade, and encourage people-to-people connections to reduce mistrust. The future of our region depends not on conflict, but on cooperation. If Afghanistan and Pakistan work together sincerely, we can transform instability into opportunity and build long-lasting peace and for future generation. I stand before you today as an Afghan who has watched our homeland weather decades of storm. When we look across our eastern border at Pakistan, we do not just see a neighbor, we see a mirror of our own struggles with stability, militancy, and unmet peace. Today, I want to speak about Pakistan's Tehreek-e-Taliban and the path to genuine regional stability. For too long, the approach to conflict management along the Durand Line has been flawed. It has been treated as a transactional game of proxy dynamics, temporary ceasefire, and shifting blame between Kabul and Islamabad. As an Afghan, I say clearly, this fractured approach is failing us both. The TTP is not just Pakistan's internal security crisis, it is a direct threat to Afghanistan's long-term stability. When conflict rages in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or Balochistan, the shockwaves tear through Nangarhar, Khos, and Kunard. True conflict management cannot rely on short-sighted tactics. We must look at the long-term structural changes required for permanent peace. Ending the dual proxy mindset is the first to tackle. For decades, regional powers used non-state actors as foreign policy tools. This strategy has backfired. A stable Pakistan requires a stable Afghanistan, and neither can achieve security by tolerating militancy next door. Second, a unified regional security framework is required. Piecemeal deals deals between Islamabad and specific militant factions always collapsed. We need a transparent regional security mechanisms that binds Kabul, Islamabad, and regional stakeholders to shared counter-terrorism benchmarks. Respected professors, strengthening diplomatic dialogue is another key important solution. Regular meetings between Afghan and Pakistani leaders can reduce misunderstanding and build trust. Open communication channels help prevent tensions from escalating. Fourth, economic cooperation and trade. Expanding trade routes, transit agreements, and regional investment projects can create mutual economic benefits and reduce hostilities. Fifth, refugee and humanitarian agreements. Pakistan and Afghanistan should cooperate on refugee rights, safe returns, education, humanitarian support for displaced populations. Regional and international mediation, organizations such as United Nations or regional partners can help facilitate peace talks and confidence building measures. To conclude, the long-term stability of Afghanistan is tied to how this conflict is managed. If Pakistan chooses purely militaristic, heavy-handed crackdowns without addressing the governance vacuums at home, it will only push more instability into Afghanistan. Conversely, if Afghanistan fails to secure its own soil from cross-border raids, we invite perpetual isolation and economic ruin. Real conflict management is not about winning a war of narratives. It is about realizing that our security is indivisible. Peace in Kabul is impossible without stability in Islamabad, and stability in Islamabad cannot be achieved by destabilizing Kabul. Let us move past the rhetoric of blame. Let us build a future rooted in mutual respect for sovereignty, rigorous security cooperation, and shared prosperity. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Brasher, for talking about the South Asian regional dynamics and also bringing India into the equation of Pakistan and India. And to Dr. Faiz Aland, really appreciate you bringing forward the Afghan perspective on what's needed. It's really important to always listen to the other side to develop that kind of a human angle when we're talking about not just regional dynamics or, big power competition, because at the end of the day, we're talking about what impacts communities, but impacts homes on both sides of the border. So I think it's really important to always have that kind of empathy, and that can only take place when we have such conferences where we engage with dialogue from both sides. Wonderful insights by Ambassador Asif Durrani and Dr. Amir Raza as well. Thank you so much for sharing your wonderful insights. I will now open this panel for question and answers. So if anyone has any questions, yes, you may open your mic and address it to the person that you want to. All right, so we will have 3 questions first. Introduce yourself, address it to the person that you want the question to be answered by. So after first 3 questions, then we will go with the answer. Thank you.
My name is Mohammed Hasib, and I am a PhD student at Center for Public Policy and Governance. So my question is from Dr. Amir that you have mentioned. The whole presentation was about the events that happened in the past. Now, the narrative or the context that the Pakistani state is developing is that whenever we're going to look into the Afghan issue, we need to have that Indian aspect in the whole security paradigm. Now it is less of the hatred of Afghan people, and now it is more of the exploitation or how the India is exploiting that hatred of Afghan people. So, do you disagree with the statement, or do you see it in a different perspective? So, what's your take on that? And the second question is that is there any role that China can play other than facilitating the negotiations between India and Pakistan? Thank you. Yes, Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Second question. Yes, you can come forward. Or do we have a mic, Aisha? Mic. So the mic will come. Thank you for that question. Let's just take one more question and then we'll go to the answer. So is there any more question from the panel? Seeing none, Dr. Amir Raza, now you have the floor. Thank you.
Since I'm the only one present in the hall, it's only natural. Thank you. First off, to your first question about the India and how this is currently going on. I think I briefly touched upon it at the very end of my presentation. I said there should have been more dedicated to this. I don't think, I mean, as of today, I don't think that Pakistan believes that the Indian issue, Indian factor in Afghanistan is bigger for Pakistan security than TTP is. Although, since Pakistan is not only now calling TTP Fitna al-Khawarij, they're also calling it Fitna al-Hind. So to kind of conflate the two with each other or correlate the two with each other. So in that sense, yes, this is something that is developing. I'm sure. I think I think Asif Durrani Sahab said in his presentation when he was speaking, he said that if Afghanistan is destabilized, if the Taliban are insecure, you would see that this would become more of an open space for intelligence activity. And I think that is the sort of intelligence activity that Ambassador Durrani, I think, was pointing at, and what you are pointing at, which is a very real threat. I'm sure India is not the that is trying to capitalize on the situation. So yes. On China and what other role China can play, China has been facilitating. Chinese relations with the Taliban has not been a straightforward relationship in any case either. So, for example, China had made investments in Afghanistan. Some of them were prior to the Taliban, and some of these contracts were renewed during the Taliban. Not enough progress was made on these, and the Taliban were quite China was quite frustrated with the Taliban. The Taliban were quite unhappy with China. So right now, I don't think China has big enough economic influence in Afghanistan, if that's what you were thinking, for China to kind of pull that lever and make the Taliban do what Chinese would like for them to do. But I think the Taliban do believe that going forward, China would be an important actor for them, if, number one, for legitimacy, number two, for economic development, and for generally for stability. So in that sense, yes, I think China can continue to play the role. I think China, as I said, is respected by both. For the second question, or for the second questioner and the first question, I did not say that the Afghan Taliban say that there would be a nexus between TTP and ISKP. What I said was that they believe that the TTP fighters might go and join ISKP, which there has been a history of. So, for example, number one, you have to distinguish between, you said ISKP Khorasan chapter. ISKP already has Khorasan chapter in it, right? So first off, you have to remember that the first head of the ISKP, who was he? His name was Hafiz Saeed Khan. Hafiz Saeed Khan was the Orakzai head of the TTP. And he joined, yeah. So he was the TTP head in the Orakzai, now at the time it was called agency, now it's called district. That is where Hafiz Saeed Khan was, he joined. They've had 6 heads at the ISKP, and at least 3 of them come from the Taliban, either from Afghan Taliban or the TTP. So that's where they fear it. It is not that the TTP would merge into ISKP, it is that we might lose these people. Otherwise, your point about them ideologically being different is right. This is when the ISKP came into this region. Mullah Akhtar Mansoor, who was the head of the Afghan Taliban at the time, he wrote a letter to Abu Bakr Baghdadi, who was the head of the Islamic State Central, now that we call it. At the time, it was just called Islamic State. And he said, Akhtar Mansoor said that there could not be 2 flags in one territory, meaning that if we already have a flag here, you cannot bring your flag to this region. To which the Islamic State propaganda network, they responded to it by saying that Taliban were actually nationalists and not Islamists, because you are confined to, like you said, to this region, and your so-called jihad is not a universal jihad. So these are nationalists who are confined to this place. They want to rule this area, whereas we are more universalist in nature, in our ambitions. And the other thing that you have to remember, I think I briefly mentioned this when I was speaking, is that ISKP portrays itself as an anti-system, in the sense that they do not, at least in rhetoric, they do not believe in the nation-state system as it exists. They want to reshape now. Maybe this would sound idiotic to you, but it is what it is. I mean, I'm sure the idea of terrorism sounds idiotic to you in the first place. The other thing that you said, that whether the Taliban care for public opinion, or they see, this is what I tell my students in the first class, that we should never talk in absolutes about anything, right? It is not like they care about public opinion. They are very democratic and they don't care about public opinion. Everyone cares about public opinion to a degree. The Saudi regime cares about public opinion, right? How much do they care about public opinion? Do they care about public opinion like a Scandinavian country? I don't think so. But they still would like to be liked by people more. So that is the other thing. But also you have to remember that Afghanistan is a very volatile country, and there has the regime stability is always a problem. So you have to care about what people think of you. So I do think that the Taliban do feel that Afghans viewing them more favorably is still better for them than not being viewed favorably. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Amir. We would like to have another round of questions. Dr. Sir Rahim has a question, and anyone else? So we'll take a question from...
On this, the panel has to say something.
Yeah, Sir Rahim, and then Dr. Noel would like to say some few words. So, Sir Rahim, please go ahead.
Aisha, not me. I was asking the panelists the two questions were put across, and one in which you refer to Ambassador Durrani's statement. If the panelists have to intervene or say something, please, before we move to the next questions.
I'm sorry, I forgot what the intervention was. Because
it is with the respect to the Indian role. I think the understanding was, the more there is acrimony between the Taliban and Islam, Kabul and Islamabad, the more space will be for the Indians to play about in that area. So it was in this context.
Well, I think let's be fair to Afghans. It's just not Taliban. We have a common refrain that Afghans were the first who opposed Pakistan's entry into the United Nations. But we forget it was just for 2 weeks. And presumably, my research shows that the Afghan rep did not have the instructions. And once he got the instructions, he withdrew his objection. Second thing, Afghans forget about Taliban. Afghans may have their some mindsets with regard to, say, Durand Line, or they were also projecting some Pashtunistan issue. But when there was real problem Pakistan faced at the hands of India, whether it was 65 war or 71 war. In 65 war, King Zahir Shah called Ayub Khan and asked him to pull back his troops, saying that I'll not stab you in the back. We did that. Secondly, in 71, he called in our ambassador in Kabul and repeated the same assurances, and we pulled back our troops. Thirdly, on Kashmir dispute, till date, right from Zahir Shah till date, none of the Afghan governments, irrespective, whether those were communists or those were Mujahideen or those were Zahir Shahs, they maintained a neutral stance on Kashmir. It's a big thing. Otherwise, had our common refrain about that Afghans have been eating from the Indian hands. So it would have been very easy for Afghans to support the Indian stance on Kashmir. They did not. So let's be realistic about. So these, what we are talking now about the Taliban, or as I said in my presentation, they are still in a jihad mode. They feel like they are militants. They are not a government at the moment, and they have to learn the art of governance, and that's the big problem. And that's entirely my private, my personal view, which I'm sharing. But with regard to Afghanistan, there are 17 tribes along the border, divided tribes on both sides. And how can you separate them while border is there? Yes, it is a gradual approach that now we have introduced one document regime. Passports have been introduced. So it started with the Torkham. Earlier there was resistance, but now it is being accepted. And later on, we had that at Chaman. When I was special rep on Afghanistan, there was fierce resistance at Chaman. And there was long, sit-in by thousands of people. But now that has been resolved. And then one document regime is considered to be rather more favorable to any visitor from Afghanistan. So these are the gradual processes, and don't forget that we are dealing with the tribes, and they have their own mindsets. So that mindset takes time to change. So this is what I wanted to say, that in the overall things, that's why I still maintain there is a temporary phenomenon, whatever is happening between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And it will get improved, and the situation would get improved hopefully with our side playing its cards deftly. Thank you.
Thank you. Zareen, next question, please.
Yeah, I have a question for Professor Zaland. Just curious about what kind of impact have refugees coming back to Afghanistan had in Afghanistan, not just on the refugees themselves. I'm sure their life has been shattered if you're forcibly repatriated, but the general stability within Afghanistan. Where have they gone? Were there areas already where they've settled?
Have the Taliban sort of settled them? So what has been the impact on Afghan society and also public opinion in Afghan society, and how has that been used by the Taliban vis-a-vis, the relationship with Pakistan? The other question I had was, on your slide, you mentioned a fatwa by Dr. Ahmed. You mentioned a slide where the um, the head of the Taliban basically gave a fatwa that Pakistan. Yes, I mean, what I understood was that there was a fatwa that Pakistan was fair game in terms of jihad. Opposite. Okay. So then why does the TTP still target Pakistan, given that particular fatwa? I can take the luxury that there are not too many questions to ask. You did not um, elaborate on what we do here in the news is a deep disconnect, and at times, people write about power struggle between Kabul and Kandahar. So in terms of international legitimacy, specifically in terms of relationship with Pakistan and the TTP, is there a concrete difference between these two groups within Afghanistan? And that's also for Professor Zalend in Kabul. Lastly, I want to find out also leverage, if any, does any state or group have on the Taliban? I mean, if you want to really influence Taliban behavior, what is, single most, if any, thing that you can use? Thank you.
So I think we can first go to Dr. Zelen and answer the question for the resettlement of refugees in Afghanistan. Please also, if you can include 100,000 refugees which have been repatriated as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the question. I think on the refugees resettlement in Afghanistan, it is one of the very dire and hardest situation for all Afghans to return. Because with the evacuation process of United States, EU, and all the former powers who were involved in Afghanistan's 20 years reconstruction building, they have been calling for evacuating those Afghans who work with them, evacuating those Afghans who have established life with girls' education, women participation, and with the polarities of the political processes in past 20 years. They have been migrating or migrated or evacuated. While Pakistan and Iran, both they are sending a big influx of people forcefully into Afghanistan. So the first part is that very psychoanalytic condition of all these repatriation is under pressure, and they are feeling very much not prepared to resettle back in Afghanistan. The humanitarian aspect of the repatriation is another very big burden. Currently, as just we are discussing issues in this conference, thousands of families in very hard and dire situation with very warm weather, they are queuing on both borders while the both borders were closed. Gates, Torkham and Spinbul, that thousands of families are queuing, and they are doubling and tripling every day. Without having smooth access to Afghanistan through both sides, border and refugee management authorities. So the humanitarian aspect is also very dire. Third, social, economic, and political aspects, they are feeling and facing a lot of burden and trouble, resettling in Afghanistan. Many of these families, many of these Afghans who lived in Karachi and Peshawar and Lahore, and areas where mostly the life was more urbanized in Afghanistan, cities are highly populated without having access to the very primary citizen rights and rules. Drinking water, health centers, jobs, these are lacking already. So coming back from Pakistan and Iran, the families, they are facing a lot of economic problems, a lot of social problems, and even political problems. Recently, there were families repatriated from Pakistan who are journalists, who are wakils, judges, who were previous government employees, who were political actors, and they were planning to use Pakistan as a third country and migrate to Europe or US. They have been repatriated back to Afghanistan, so they face security threats also. So all these problems are not only creating more burden, more pressure on Afghan society, it also increases understanding and political conflict management of Pakistan-Afghanistan current turmoil. On the issues of whom to communicate and discuss on Afghanistan side, specifically with Taliban, I think previously His Excellency Ambassador Durrani Saib rightly mentioned that Taliban are playing a united military front rather than a government which believes on diplomacy, on diplomatic approaches. I think that problem is still there, and Taliban very unitedly, they are following their problems and communication with Pakistan, and internally, domestically also, they are unitedly approaching to problems to keep on the power, to continuously establish their governance structure across the country and oversight the monocratic approach to, or the monopoly of approach to governance. Thank you so much.
Dr. Amir, you can continue. Sorry, we have run out of light over here, but we'll continue the session. So for the first thing, when you said that there was about the edict by the Supreme Leader, the Afghan Supreme Leader in 2023. So there have been a couple of statements like this one by this one that we just mentioned by Amir Hebatullah himself. And if you remember, more recently, there were an estimated more than 1,000 Afghan ulama, as it was stated, that who gathered, and they said that Afghan territory should not be used in attacks outside of Afghanistan. Now, with the Amir Hebatullah edict, see, the problem was that he said that Afghans are disallowed from going and fighting in wars elsewhere. It was not a blanket for everyone to not fight in Pakistan, but it was just that Afghans should not join in. And the other one, although the one that was given by, like I said, the 1,000, more than 1,000 ulama, apparently, it was more specific. It said that the Afghan territory should not be used in committing acts of violence against other countries, which I think was more specific, I think, or more relevant to what was happening in Pakistan. Now, but with both of these, there were two caveats. Number one, if these things have to be more binding, they have to come from the Darul Ifta of the Afghan Taliban. And they said it about both of these statements, that although these statements are important, they've not come. So the Darul Ifta publishes something which is called Badrul Fatawa, which are the volume of fatwas that are officially accepted by the Taliban and officially enforced. So the first one was more like a statement that the Amir gave. The other one was more like an informal, unofficial gathering of ulama. So you can read into it, but like I said, unless it is, so you can think of this more like a resolution versus an act, although this is not even a legislative body. So from political science perspective, it would not even make sense. You can think of this more like people saying something in Jalsa versus an act of the parliament. So that is one part of this. The other part of this is that I think with these things, what the Afghan Taliban do, and I think Zalan was just saying how they've become more diplomatically oriented and they understand how to play the gallery when it comes to international politics.
So they do these things so that when they sit with you, they can present this to you and they say, okay, so international community should see that how we are making progress. We made that statement or the statement. So that is one part. The other thing about the Kandahar versus more like Greater Paktia, I think when with the Haqqani network, that division that people used to talk about, we used to talk about that too. I think about 3 years ago, there was anyone who understood anything about Afghanistan. That's all they wanted to talk about. That okay, so these people who are in Greater Paktia, they are more flexible, and people who are in Kandahar, which I think remains the case with regard to
Apparently, they are facing some rainstorm issues as well, so their electricity is having problems. The UPS just went out, but they're trying to get back.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, they're trying to get back as soon as possible.
Yeah. Well, we can't do much about it. So
who might be they could countries. China, I from the Western values point of view do not view these issues as like human rights and women's rights perhaps not as central to China's approach countries, I think, as these countries. So I think China definitely has leverage because I think Afghanistan believe the Taliban would believe that for them to become more legitimate, Pakistan even religious there was a just an example. We see that went to Afghanistan to meet the Taliban and to try to convince them about girls' education. That's what I'm saying. The Taliban they tend to be quite strange when it comes to these things. So the OIC sent a delegation of religious scholars to Afghanistan. But the Taliban would listen to them, they would feed them, but they never did one thing that these ulama said to them because for in the Taliban's mind, the thing is
Last year, he said that this government is no more, it should no more be government. So it leads to their, it is no more an interim government, to their mind it is what it is a permanent government. With regard to what the government structure would be, there are two things, one state and one book that I think we can look into. The statement was by Zakiullah. Someone asked him about the constitution and how the constitution making is coming.
Military strategy. The geography had that place.
So then they trade on all those aspects part of awareness at this stage.
Gee, thank you, sir. I think this is very interesting. I think you touched upon the um, so what Taliban did, they tried to
It was very nice to meet you, Ambassador Durrani. Professor Zaland, good to see you again. I have to bow out. I have a faculty meeting in the morning I have to lead. But it was very good to hear your thoughts. I think you are muted, Ambassador.
I'm sorry, my voice was mute. It was really a pleasure, Dr. Brosher, and I thought that we should exchange our coordinates, and I would request the organizers to exchange that, your coordinates and mine. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I will ask Aisha Siddiqa from CPPG
Yes.
to have our
Yes,
information exchanged.
that would be wonderful. So, sweet dreams, and have a nice day.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Because it would be a morning of 13th May for you.
That is correct. Yeah, it's four in the morning.
It's already 4 in the morning.
Yeah, 4 in the morning.
Oh, then you have already lost your night sleep.
Well, it was a good opportunity to hear you and Dr. Zaland and Dr.
And whenever you are here in Islam, please let me know. I'll be glad to host you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Dr. Zaland, greetings to Kabul. I think
Dr. Zalan, I can't see him.
Yeah, you may have gone, but I believe they are doing
I'm here.
to get the.
I'm here.
Yeah, Dr. Zalan is back.
There. So good to see
Dr.
you.
Zalan, I'll
Thank you
ask
so much.
Aisha to send you my coordinates, and I'll, you allow, then I'll ask yours.
Sure.
We can exchange our numbers.
For sure. For sure. Will be
I'm
pleasure.
always at your service. Please, whenever you're in Islamabad, let me know. I'll be glad to host you.
Thank you so much. Sure.
Khudai Paman.
Khudai Paman. Thank you. Have a very nice time, everybody. Take care. خوخ ډیره مننه سلام علیکم
موضوع دا ختم شو کنه سو نه
ولکه چې خلاص بس ران بشر سي جواب کړو ته خو جوابي
جواب اوس ما واورنه دو
ولکه و دا لکسیال ته و خراب ده ډیرو بټین ډیر ښه وخت
عائشہ ته وایم چې بس موضوع
و مننه سلام علیکم ښه وخت سلام علیکم سلام علیکم